Hey folks, it's the 26th of May 2017. It's the release date of the brand new reissue of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. Has a new stereo mix by Giles Martin. Now, I have started to unwrap this. I'm sorry, but I have. This sticker basically tells you have a new stereo mix of Sgt. Pepper on album 1. I believe that they've tried to get it as close to the mono mix as they could, but just in stereo. And then you have the second album of outtakes and whatnots and rehearsal takes and things from the album. Okay, so far it's looking pretty Sgt. Pepper-ish. The back as well. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. A lot of documentation there. Let's open that out, show you. Okay. I need my glasses on to read that. We have here 2 of these psychedelic sleeves because it's a double album, but you do get anti-static copies, and again it's a replica parlophone from the 60s as it would originally have come out in. Oh, golly gosh, we get a third one of these. The cutouts and the second album. Okay, these are this is called the Sgt. Pepper Sessions. So in other words, basically, it's pre-completed things. Okay. So I shall have a wee listen to those, tell you if they're any good. We're back soon. So now, people, I am back. I've been listening to the new stereo mix of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with references to the mono version and to the original stereo version. I'm a little uncertain as to what Giles Martin here was trying to achieve. And the sleeve notes don't make that particularly clear. In fact, Giles Martin says that it was his father's best piece of work. Well, in my opinion, really, there wasn't an awful lot to be gained in not leaving it alone, to be honest, other than probably making a little bit more money out of the same album and celebrating its 50th anniversary. The first thing, I mean, my impressions were that it was supposed to be going back to the 4-track mixes and making a stereo mix that sounded like the mono mix. Well, it doesn't really do that, because the first thing that you look out for in terms of major differences between the stereo and mono mixes of the original is the fact that at the end of track 1, Sgt. Pepper's, there's an extra burst of guitar in the mono mix which isn't there in the stereo mix, and it's certainly not there in the new stereo mix. Having said that, though, still on side 1, She's Leaving Home is in the same key as the mono mix. The mono mix was sped up from the original key of E to put it into F major. In the original stereo mix, they didn't speed it up, so it's in E major. And I've checked that out by referencing back to the old mixes and playing along with it on the piano. So yeah, I'm just a little underwhelmed, I suppose, is the word, really. I don't see that there was any point in changing any of the stereo positioning. In some cases, in fact, in a lot of places, particularly things like Lucy in the Sky, it almost sounds like fake stereo. Certainly, there seems to be very little happening on the right-hand channel at all. It's much more solid in the original stereo mix and in the mono mix. The image in front of you is much more believable. It seems to have been drowned in reverb, or not necessarily drowned in reverb, but maybe they've accentuated whatever reverb was there, and it just kind of loses some of its immediacy. Really, I think that's the thing. I also think that Giles Martin's bass EQing is a little over the top. I think the the track one, Sergeant Pepper, actually sounds, the bass guitar is over in the left channel, and it really booms away there, and at the expense of the drums. It's not particularly well balanced there. Having said that, A Day in the Life sounds absolutely amazing in the new stereo mix, despite the fact that they did the sacrilegious thing and didn't swap over the channels. After Paul's woke up, fell out of bed, and I went into a dream, then you sort of have this dream sequence of a sort of choir singing ah, ah, and so on, and you have the brass band that goes ba 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 bum. By that time, you've then got a swap over of all the rhythm tracks, and that doesn't happen in the new mix, or at least it doesn't happen as clearly. The choir part moves around the stereo spectrum and sounds really wiggy and amazing, but everything else appears to stay where it is. They've tried to centralise a lot of the vocal performances where they were either singing hard left or hard right. They seem to have put them in the centre, which is, I suppose, what has become accepted. The traditionally accepted kind of stereo method from about 1970 something or other onwards, but it doesn't work for their albums. They were balanced correctly anyway, and I also take issue with some of this thing about the fact that the Beatles were not in the control room for a lot of the stereo mixing. I think they actually were, and I think if you look in this in the Mark Lewison studio recordings, but I showed you in a different video, you can see that there were times where they were done at the same time, and I just think they did it right the first time. The mono mix does sound better, but I don't believe that this new stereo mix sounds as good as the mono mix, and and there is kind of justification for me saying that it doesn't actually sound as good in places as the old stereo mix. So yeah, the second album is interesting. It's like a Beatles anthology style thing. In fact, A Day in the Life seems to have been lifted from the anthology. You do get to hear the first take where, after the orchestral players had gone home, they practiced a humming ending, and you get to hear that. It's the first time I've heard that. So yeah, it is interesting, but yeah, it's not going to be any more than a curiosity. It's certainly not going to be my go-to mix for listening to Sergeant Pepper. That will always be the mono. So yeah, buy it by all means, but don't expect any great revelations from it. It isn't. Okay, bye.